We've been going every weekday since March, pretty much, except for a few vacation days. And we're grateful that you're all here and you're all coming and continuing to come and participating and offering things. So thank you for making this a success. I'm here in Evanston, Illinois. If you can open your chat and say hi. Felicia's from New Jersey and Michelle from Western New York. Hi, Sarah from Michigan, Jill from Wisconsin. Hi, Elda from Cleveland, Texas. I recognize names. Hi, Michelle from Central Pennsylvania. Wonderful to be here. Today, we have a very important topic, a very timely topic, a path toward building authentic relationships and creating institutional change. And you might remember Carol was here doing this same basic topic a couple of months ago, and she didn't. We decided at that time that we needed, she had to rush through the allyship part of it. And we were like, we need more allyship. We need to understand this better. So she has graciously agreed to be here today to dive deep into allyship. So welcome, Carol, and she'll introduce more her herself as we move forward. After I just kind of remind people of the ways to engage, which you're already using, the chat. Hi, Maria. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Caitlin. Hi, Ricardo. Welcome, Vivian. Welcome, Trinisha. Welcome, Audrey, Alexis, Wawan. It's wonderful to see you all. And the chat is yours. You can use it for comments, use it for questions, use it to answer questions, use it to comment to each other. It's yours, and it's our main way to engage. You can also raise your hand, and it just takes a little longer. If you raise your hand, Andrew, who's in the background, will unmute you, and then you'll need to unmute yourself, and then you'll be able to speak. So those are the two ways to engage. And then whenever Be Strong Families does anything, we have agreements, and the agreements are in the service, in the recognition that we co-create this safe space together to learn and to grow and to, we have to be, has to be a safe space so that we can let down our guard enough in order to be vulnerable and in order to be able to take in new information and new ideas. So if you agree to these agreements, do what everybody's doing in the chat. You've got a very active group today, Carol, which I love. You've got a very active group. So thank you, everybody, for agreeing. And let's move to the next slide, and I will turn it over to Carol.
Thank you, Kathy. Wow, this is exciting. I see that I'm not going to have any problems at all trying to keep this interactive because looks like folks are ready to go. So, and it's Andrew, right? Thank you for putting that summary in the chat. That was very, very helpful. So as Kathy mentioned, I'm Carol Mizuguchi, and currently I'm the director of the Office of Community Services with the city of Alexandria. For those of you who I didn't have the opportunity to meet last time. And I have, oh my goodness, I don't know, for the last 25 plus years, worked on this whole idea around social justice and racial equity with the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond as a resource trainer, and also just kind of in different capacities incorporating these principles into my work. And I thank you so much, Kathy, for this opportunity to do this webinar and also future webinars just to work with your organization.
My pleasure. We're so delighted to have you. I'm just going to be in the background because unless I'm needed. Okay.
Okay. All right. So next slide, please. And I'm going to try and make sure we get through everything. So for today, basically, we hope to talk about how to build authentic relationships and specifically looking at allyship. And then what I want to do is to share some practical tools and tips towards allyship. So that will hopefully we'll get to that and have an opportunity to look at some of the tools that I've used, some of the tools that the People's Institute has used, and some of the tools that we're currently using with the city of Alexandria. And then next slide, a quick review. Can I just get maybe a show of hands or in the chat? How many people were on the first webinar with me? You can, so there's, okay. I see just one person so far. Okay, what I want to do, I'm going to do a quick review, and I don't want to spend a lot of time because this is where we got stuck last time going over in the vocabulary. We had this real rich conversation, but I want to make it clear when we're talking about racism, we are using the People's Institute definition here, and it's race prejudice plus power equals racism. We use that formula. It's simple. When we look at race, we're talking about race as being specious, which because it's ever changing, and then prejudice, and then the power. So Kathy asked me earlier, like, are you going to talk about what's been going on, you know, current events? And so the power, when we talk about power, we are speaking of state sanctioned power. And the example on Wednesday with the lack of force that was used against a group of predominantly, and for the most part, I mean, there were one or two brown faces in there, but white people, it's this extended courtesy, right? Everyone is aware that had that been Black Lives Matter or another group, a group of people of color, it wouldn't have happened the way it happened. You would have had more arrests, and you probably would have had several people actually murdered by the police. And so that's the type of power we talk about, is state sanctioned power. It's a courtesy that is afforded to white people that isn't extended to people of color. And then there's the Anti-Defamation League. They have a definition that I really, really like. And you can see it here. It's the marginalization and or oppression of people of color based on a socially constructed racial hierarchy that privileges white people. And the thing that's really important to remember about racism, we're not talking about bigotry. Often people confuse that. And from the People's Institute standpoint, we believe, because people of color in the United States of America do not have power, the state sanctioned power, that people of color cannot be racist. And again, as I explained in the first webinar, definitely we can be prejudiced, we can discriminate, but we cannot be racist. Okay, next slide. So allyship, this is where we are going to focus our attention today, is around allyship. So I have a quick, how many of you have ever heard of the curb effect? It's CURB effect. In the chat, yes, I have. No, what are you talking about? I see a no. No, 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 no. Okay. Sounds like a 2-year-old, right? No, no, no. When they're, we've all had our toddler experience. Okay. Okay. So it seems like most of the people haven't heard of it. And so this is something that I want us to keep in mind when we're talking about social justice, and specifically around social justice, because sometimes there's this thought that with equity, if one group benefits, then somebody's going to lose, right? And so nobody wants to give up that power or whatever it is. They don't want a power share. They don't want, it keeps us from being real strong allies, because you're asking me to change. And if you get this, then I'm somehow going to lose something. And so the thing about the curve, I know everyone has seen in the sidewalks. The curb that is designed specifically is really for people who are in wheelchairs, right? It was for the disability community. There's a lot of advocacy to make that easy for people in wheelchairs. One thing that we know, even those of us that are not in wheelchairs, we have benefited from that curb. Whether you're on a bike, maybe you're rolling a stroller, or, you know, different times where we benefit. So when we think about equity and we think about this whole idea of this shared humanity, I want people to keep that in the back of their minds, that oftentimes what happens when we provide for a group that has been marginalized, what ends up happening is many people, curb cuts, yep, that's exactly what it is. The curb cuts, many people benefit from that. And so I think if we hold that as kind of as a truth, that there's this possibility that we can create an equitable society, and maybe bringing people that have been marginalized, providing for them, that society as a whole can benefit for whatever product or policy we come up with. So it's something that I think is very, very powerful when we think about allyship. So also in the chat, we're going to chat again. I want you to complete the following statement about how you see yourself. So what I want you to do is, the statement is, complete the statement. It says, my name is, so I would write, my name is Carol, and I am a Black woman, mother, daughter, sister, activist, director. So I want folks to take and try to include as much as you want. And you also, if you can do it on a separate piece of paper so you have this later.
We've got, my name is Lauren, and I'm an upstander.
Okay, Lauren, I need you to explain that one.
And Allegra's asking if you can repeat the quest.
The request. Oh, okay. So complete the sentence. My name is, and I am, and then include as much as possible about how you identify.
Okay, so my name is Renee, and I'm a mixed cultured woman who is unshakable.
Ooh. Thank you, Andrew. Challenge.
My name is Audrey. My name is Sarah, and I'm a challenger. My name is Petria, and I'm an ancestor in training. I'm going to be much more like specific. Okay, I put a bunch of them in there, and they're, for me, I'm Kathy, and I'm white, Jewish, mother of Black children. I'm a psychologist, a CEO, a yogini, and a life coach, you know? So
nice.
It's just a few of them, but those are like, you know, just like, I was thinking you're asking for in the world, like what are your, not just the adjectives you would describe yourself with, but what are your identities, or, you know, your public identities. Jewish American mother. Allegra says she's a Jewish American mother, wife, and systems changer. Dorothy is a Seventh-day Adventist. My name is Ricardo. I'm a citizen of the world for the world. Alexis is a US-born multi-generational Latina, detribalized indigenous person, facilitator, leader, an elder in training, emerging elder, right, Alexis? Kawana is an African-American preschool teacher. Audrey is a Black woman who is a determined leader, mother, and encourager. Carol is an African-American Christian mother, daughter, sister. Tracy, African-American professional Black woman, and I'm another woman of faith and law-abiding citizen and community services worker and advocate with specifics for children and elders. Caitlin, I'm white special needs mom and advocate. Maria says she's
Nice.
Hispanic and her first language is Spanish. Jill,
Nice.
my name is Jill and I'm a woman, wife, mother, sibling, daughter. I'm curious and I want to be a lifelong learner. Lawan is a beautiful African-American woman, mother, grandparent, sister, friend, gift. Spiritual warrior, yeah, me too, Lawan. And a voice to the voiceless in my community, nice. My name is Elda and I'm a Hispanic Catholic woman, wife, mother, daughter, sister, worker, and facilitator. My name is Andrew and I'm a white male, Midwestern, privileged and trying to keep learning and listening. My name is Raquel, I'm a Mexican student, mother, grandmother, and keeper of everything. My name is Caitlin. I'm a white expecting mother who is determined, loyal, and ongoing learner. My name is Taria, and I'm a strong Black woman that can't be broken, a future LICSW and entrepreneur in the making. Maria says she's a believer in Christ, Afro-Latina, wife, mother, sister, friend, and social activist. And Alexandra is an African-American woman who is a mother, daughter, poet, MC, community activist, and program developer, reverend, and African spiritual tradition priestess. My name is Becca, and I'm a white Jewish woman, sister, nurse, and lifelong learner.
Nice, nice, nice. Okay. So part of the reason and during this exercise is to also get us to think about the different positions that we hold in society. Sometimes what happens when we talk about allyship, especially in the context of social justice and racial equity, you have people of color who will say, well, I'm not privileged and therefore I don't have power. And so yes, overall in this society, you might not have power as a person of color when we use the definition of power, but in different positions and roles in our lives, we have the opportunity where we are privileged. And one of the examples that I like to use, which is why I purposely pulled out Christian in my background, was if you are at a conference that's on world religions or just on religion, some of the faith-based breakfasts, and it's predominantly Christians in that room, and there's folks that might be from a different faith, you hold a position of privilege. And as an ally, we have to think about what our role is. And so when we think about taking the risk on behalf of those that are marginalized, in that setting, it would be very appropriate for me as an African-American woman Christian to speak out if there was something that happened where there was an offense against my Islamic brother. So that is again, just kind of putting things into context. So allyship is always, the role here is for you to assume the risk of those that are marginalized. So we'll go to the next slide with the definition that allyship is a way of life that one adopts to actively, and I like to focus on that word, actively, work towards promoting racial equity and social justice for all. Remember from the first webinar, and then some people weren't on the first webinar, but just thinking that the goal here, our North Star in this work, is for shared humanity, right? So it's important to think about racial equity and social justice for all. How it plays out, there's an acronym, it's CLAIM, and I'll go through each one of the letters. But I do, and we'll go back to this whole idea of actively work towards, because that's the part. You have people who will say, I'm an ally. And then you sit in a meeting with them and you think, oh, I got Kathy in this meeting. She's my ally. And then something happens. Kathy shakes her head, but nothing comes out of her mouth.
That's not going to happen, Carol.
I don't think that'll happen. And I thought, well, it's safe to use you as an example, but it's not a very good one because I can't see you doing that. But you know, it happens. I'm sure many of us have been on that side. So again, thinking about the whole idea of a world where we all embrace, you know, where everybody is embraced and able to thrive, to reach their highest potential. So in the acronym here, so the C is care, and care is this ability to be empathetic about marginalized communities and their experiences, and believing that everyone deserves equity. I think that's an easy one when we talk about allyship. Like everybody on this webinar will find that to be something that is very easy for them. Learn, the L, and claim, actively seeking opportunities to educate oneself about the issues. This is very important. And one of the things that keep in mind, it is when we decide that we are going to be allies, it is up to us as an ally to educate ourselves. The burden, again, just like the risk shouldn't be placed on the marginalized communities, the burden of educating you should not be placed on those that are marginalized. How many times do we hear as women when we have men and say, "Oh, just teach me how to be," or how say it's not my responsibility. Like you're adding this burden, and so a true ally, we should never add that burden. Now there are teachable moments where you have a white person or people of color, and they will offer you, you know, but to ask them to sit with you for hours and explain, well, why do you feel this way, and how, there's so much written, especially now with the internet and Google, there's so many opportunities. You know, I had a neighbor recently who decided to put this flag up, and maybe this probably happened even during the first webinar, celebrating Constitution Day. And I walked outside of my apartment and I was like, who the heck put this big ass flag out here? I sent a group text to everyone in the building, and he was like, I did, because it's Constitution Day and we're celebrating. And I'm like, why would I want to celebrate the Constitution? Like, I guess you don't know your history, you know? And he's like, I don't, but maybe you can educate me. And it's like, you know what? I don't have the responsibility. And if he was truly interested in being an ally, because I sent him a list of books and some videos that he could watch, suggest. I even went that far. He still hasn't. So he had no interest. He has no interest in being an ally. So again, learn. So taking those opportunities, and then adopt. So adopting appropriate and considerate and conscious behavior regularly. So that word regularly is very important. Appropriate, considerate, conscious behavior. One of the things, and I haven't heard back from my friends. So being from Seattle, there's a large gay and lesbian community, and many years ago, in consideration before we had same-sex marriage, I would refer to my spouse as my partner instead of my husband, or, you know, just in consideration. That was my behavior. And so it's those type of things that we can do. Again, when you think about those that are marginalized and you think about where you have a position of privilege, is there something that you can do in your language, in your behavior, so that you show people that you stand with them as an ally. So my question today, though, and none of my friends have gotten back to me. So I guess when I get back to Seattle in a couple of weeks, I'll ask them, like, do I still have to do that? Because now that you have same-sex marriage is legal, like, you know, the marriage equality, like, do I still need to do that? But I don't know, because things are ever changing. And then there's influence. So the I in claim is influence, deliberately engaging opponents and passive people about issues to promote anti-racism and social justice. So again, depending on where you are in your circle of influence, being deliberate about it. If you know, and we'll talk a little bit about the spectrum, kind of this continuum of where people sit in relation to allyship with this work. Bring the topic up. And right now, I mean, Wednesday, we have perfect opportunity, right? There's so much. So as people, white people are wanting and claiming and working to be allies, it's been interesting that we've had a lot of the journalists, and, you know, I first heard it, and maybe that's just my sensitivity, from people of color who were saying, now everybody knows if those were Black people, the police would have been beating them in the head, you know, all of this stuff. But, and then eventually you start hearing other people say it. But there's an opportunity. They're using that platform to help people to bring that awareness about, like, look at the differences. Look how people of color are treated in our society. So using current events, or maybe you're in a meeting, however, just being deliberate about being really intentional about using your influence. And then there's the M, which is to maintain. So really securing that the commitment from participants to live actively as allies who understand that claiming should be a cyclical process, and if enhanced personal growth and impact. So it keeps happening, right? You don't just do it once. And all of these things can occur simultaneously, but this is a way of life. This is the way we function always as an ally. Any questions?
Allegra says she really likes the acronym. The influence piece, the deliberately engaging opponents piece, the passive people I understand, the opponents, I'm just saying, as it's really difficult. And yes. I think that deliberately, like my question would be how to do that effectively, or, you know, because the same wearing down, like of your spirit, you know, if I'm talking to family members who are, you know, are ardent Trump supporters, you know, I've done it. I will do it. I'll continue to express my opinion. I'll continue to go, but it doesn't feel, and I'm saying Trump supporters like white like that I see as bordering on white supremacy, you know, like white supremacy, you know, mm-hmm. I'll point at Al, but the arguments sometimes don't seem to be going anywhere, you know, and just seem to be eroding the relationship. So I think that's something that as allies, a lot of us need tools or strategies to be able to effectively influence.
And that, you're absolutely right. And we'll talk a little bit about that, like some strategies and some tools and some language. And I will also say this with some of your or our opponents, especially the active opponents, though I don't recommend or suggest that someone who is part of the KKK as an active member and they exhibit bigotry and hatred, there's really no need to try and actively engage them. Now, you might have some people who are opponents, and it's just kind of, and I won't even call them passive, they're just kind of on the spectrum, right? Where they don't believe, like, I don't see color.
Yeah.
Or we're all just human. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, I wish, like,
where I haven't been successful is, like, I shared a Trevor Noah clip, you know, because it's funny, right? But he was talking about, like, he was talking directly about, if you don't believe being Black in America is is a problem, and he was going over it, and I shared it with some of my relatives, and it got through, like, it got through, right. It was really interesting because my Aunt Shirley, who is an elder, and my mother, you know, watched it and put in the chat, you know, that's really good. And so that meant that my other relatives who wouldn't take it from me, do you know what I mean? They probably wouldn't have watched it if it was just me. putting it out there, but because it was endorsed by people that they, that they understood were more, they felt more understood by, they watched it and it really did change their position.
Right.
Had like an epiphany, like an aha moment, like, oh my gosh.
They didn't have to have a near-death experience to have an epiphany, which is kind of what some of our opponents, what has happened with the GOP. I think,
Right.
it was like.
That's right. Lauren says a really meaningful quote that I learned at Chicago's Holocaust Museum comes from Elie Wiesel, a survivor. We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. I frequently encourage that quiet ones who want to stay out of it to realize how their inaction and silence hurts.
Which is so true. It's so true. I love it. I'm going to have to copy that. It's a good one. And there were some other comments on here.
Yeah, maintaining commitment is needed because allyship takes effort and energy. People like the acronym, like the quote. And the rest of it, I was taking notes for everybody.
Yeah, that's good.
So that it would be in there. And then, Renee says that when I said, I went there, she said, you went there, LOL. Nope, I was called the racist in those conversations. So I don't know if Renee wants to say more about that or not.
Yeah. Renee? Give her opportunity. Oh, Trumpers. Yeah.
Trumpers. Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. So it is like, they see themselves as sometimes like, it was interesting. I get a lot of right-wing emails because I guess I was interested in the rhetoric and so I get a lot of emails that are really talking about how white people are the victim, and Trump is a victim. And I'm like, I can't see him as a victim, as the most powerful man in the world with all the money that he has and all the power that he has. I don't see how he's a victim, but he keys into their feelings of being victimized in their life and legitimates them and includes them with him. So there's a whole thing about when you engage with people, on like who is oppressed, like they legitimately feel, legitimately, not legitimate. I'm saying they authentically feel like they're oppressed, like they're being victimized, like they're being hurt.
Yeah, and it's always helpful with folks that go there. It's to give them a history lesson or to ask them to offer you facts, because typically the things that they bring up, they're easily, you can dismiss. But there's also this other reality. When we think about the whole concept of whiteness and people buying into that concept, they are victims to the degree that people have bought into that. As we know, from Bacon's Revolt, the whole idea of whiteness was only for the privileged class to stop the revolt, because the poor whites were saying, wait a minute, you guys get everything. What about us? We're down here and we're suffering. And so they came up with this whole idea of white, and they bought into it. And at that point, you had a new ranking in this hierarchy, but not necessarily all the privileges, but you still bought into this concept of whiteness. And to some degree, yeah, they've been had. It's very true. So if we want to get back to shared identity or this humanity, it is important for us to help people understand that white isn't, as somebody just said, it isn't a culture, it isn't a race.
Right.
And the things that they've lost as a result of buying into that and talking about, okay, so maybe I don't have the money, but I still have the whiteness. I still have this privilege. And how can I use it to help move all of us towards this place where there's equity for everyone?
Yeah, and there's an interesting discussion happening in the chat with Andrew started, who said that he was talking to his brother one time, and he said racism ended with the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s. And he went on to say that by my talking about racism being still very much present, I was the one who was being racist. And Lauren says, absolutely. People think that being colorblind is the absence of racism, which is not the case. Recognizing and celebrating differences is important, but it's important to also recognize bias and discrimination when we see it. And Bobby says, sorry to interrupt the conversation, but is this just a speaker meeting? I'd like to get recognized that I was also present today. Bobby, we have certificates for participation if that's what you need. I don't know if that's what you're talking about in terms of a speaker meeting, but we consider everybody who's present part of the webinar.
Yes. Okay. So next slide, I want to get to, I don't want us to, so
Yeah.
here we are just kind of talking about this spectrum. So, and we've pretty much talked about active allies. An active ally, of course, would adhere to the acronym CLAIM. And then you have the passive ally. So basically they've decided that I want to be helpful and they have some understanding, but again, that is not the person or the group of people that you want to go into battle with. And then we have a whole group of folks that are just kind of neutral. The quote, there was an excellent quote used earlier that talked about neutrality. I think I like to always think about, again, the moving sidewalks in the airport, all of the folks that are walking against it, being anti-racist, and those are the allies. And then again, you have some people who are walking in the other direction, walking briskly. We'll call them our active opposition. And then you have some people who are just going along. And the thing about it is they're still moving in that direction and they're not working towards getting us to the North Star. So,
so where does all lives matter? Somebody saying all lives matter fit into this spectrum for you?
Whew.
If Black Lives Matter and someone says all lives matter, where does that fit?
I almost put them in the active opposition.
Because
there's a lack of understanding, and you know what's the purpose of bringing that up? I always question to not you,
yeah,
to them. So what is your motivation? What is the motivation behind that?
See, I think they're trying to be neutral. I think they're trying to say, you know, let's all get along. You know, I think they're trying to say, if we think all lives matter, then Blacks will be included in that. Black lives will be included in that. I think that's what they're trying to do.
Neutrality for me, and then when we think about it, it's like people who are oblivious, who are just they sit on the fence. They're just moving in that direction, so they're not participating and engaging in those type of conversations. They're just, again, thinking about that sidewalk. They're here. There's no activity. They aren't putting up that argument around, oh, well, all lives matter. Somebody who is neutral is really just sitting on the fence, totally oblivious, haven't engaged. They're not even really paying attention.
Okay, so and Andrew says, in my mind at this point, okay, they're really different with all lives matter and Black Lives Matter. Agree that they think, some people are, I think were agreeing with me that they think they're trying to be neutral. Like, because I'm just saying I have a spectrum in my family, and I think the person that first said all lives matter to me was not the, you know, was not on in the continuum. They weren't on the the most extreme end, but agreed, not really an open mind, colorblind again. And Andrew said, in my mind at this point, anyone who says all lives matter is being willfully ignorant, but trying to appear neutral. At this point, the people who use the term all lives matter are operating in social circles that are trying to stay ignorant. And Allegra, it undermines the experience of people of color. Yeah, for sure it does. I mean, that's the point. I read this, thing by a lawyer that was talking to her law students and saying, the point is that the history is that people are being treated as if Black lives don't matter. And that's what we're trying to draw attention to here. Saying Black lives matter doesn't mean that other people's lives don't matter. That's ridiculous.
Right. So do you see though the difference where the all lives matter, where it, and even looking at some of the comments, just thinking about it, undermining the experience and the whole bit, how it isn't neutral?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I totally see why it's not neutral. I just thought it was important to ask the question because
no, I understand.
Like it kind of like puts it into the, I don't think so, because there isn't an issue with white people losing their lives like Black people losing their lives. Perfect example of what happened on Wednesday. No one feared losing their life when they were rioting.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, and the way they were allowed to just leave the building.
It has and Lauren says it has the guise of being neutral, but it's not neutral to say all lives matter. I think so too. I mean,
yeah.
I just think it's important to to be able to, sometimes I find like with a concrete example, you can understand something better. So,
Yeah, no, it was a perfect example. And I think and also just to have clarity that it isn't neutral. Neutrality. Yeah. And when you're thinking about your influence, people who are truly neutral, you have a greater opportunity to inform and win them over and to build a relationship. It's when we think about allyship, because again, most of them are oblivious. They are sitting on the fence. They haven't engaged in this conversation. Those folks that are out there screaming all lives matter, they've given some thought to this, and they've kind of taken a position that is active opposite. They have taken a position. When you are considered neutral, you don't have a position necessarily. To think about driving your car, right? If you're neutral, it's there. And again, the moving sidewalk.
So passive opposition would be somebody who says that they're apolitical, but is giving money to or voting for candidates who are, right? That would be like a passive opposition thing.
Yeah. They might not be out there protesting and marching and the whole bit, but they're definitely supporting.
Yeah.
Passive. It's kind of in the middle. I'm pointing, but I remember you guys can't see me pointing. So
Alexa says, even for allies, there will be a range of stances over time. Is that right? Like people can move between these, on this scale. I might say something that, and even inadvertently or intentionally, that is active opposition. And then I could also be in an active ally state. I mean, I think that's what she's saying. Over time, I could move to, an active ally state.
Well, again, so going back to claim, I mean, part of it is being an ally is you're maintaining certain principles, right? And so I think it is possible what you just described, because I might be in a room of men, Christian men, as the only female. Well, that's not a good example. The other one, it can happen. But that's
Alexis was saying, I was thinking more of movement from active and passive allyship, not so much from opposition to ally.
Yeah, so, stand on the same side of the spectrum and not this whole swing. And if we keep it in the context just of racial equity and social justice, I'm trying to figure out like how you could be even a passive ally and also be in the active opposition. Because then you would have to be Klan on the weekend and I'm down with folks Monday through Friday, almost in my mind. That like that, because that's an extreme.
Well, I think people have a lot of cognitive dissonance. I mean, I think that there are people who are teaching their children one thing and then going out and voting for people on other things, like, that hold values that on one hand that are, and then aren't realizing how they're really transgressing their values with their actions and behaviors and
So
conversations.
and again, I don't know if I would consider that person an active ally.
No, I would consider them an active. I mean, I'm saying that they could be, I thought it was like passive allies and active opposition or something,
Oh, okay. Yeah, and that's
like,
right. Yes.
or
Okay.
someone who, is like, I just think, people, I'm very confused by the behavior and attitudes and ideas that coexist with people, that seem opposed to each other,
I think that's why it's very important, especially in this whole idea of allyship, to be clear, to be intentional, because all of your actions, and it's not the same as being a Christian and then drinking, because those, some people biblically the whole bit, but when you think about your actions, if I'm an ally, there's this whole idea of I will do no harm. No harm to the movement, no harm to my brothers and sisters who I say, and being mindful of that, because and that's why I started off with it's a way of life, it's a lifestyle. So the fact that I could be an active ally and then send money to Trump, it doesn't, I'm not an active ally, because I'm not adhering to this whole principle of do no harm. You can't, I mean, people might turn it on and off, but if you do that, then you are not an active ally. The active ally, or even your passive ally to some degree, shouldn't do harm. They might not be a disruptor, but they also shouldn't create harm. So once you get to that place where you are creating harm, whether it's supporting or you're moving into being a part of the group of passive opposition. Not so much form opposition to allies.
This is taking notes now.
Will do no harm. Yeah, that's
just taking notes from what you're saying right now.
Yeah, I was just looking in the chat, because I think that is the place where we need to think about is doing no harm.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, okay. Next slide. Again, opportunities, thinking about the area of the internalized racism, interpersonal, institutional, structural. So as an ally, we have all these different opportunities where we can educate ourselves and others, where we have opportunity to speak out. So if you are embedded within an institution, and especially if you have a position of power, some type of influence. So many of the teachers, and then you have parents, there's ample opportunity. And that's all that slide is, just looking at the opportunities that we have as allies to speak out. And I'm speeding up now because we're running out of time again. Next slide. So thinking about some tools, and just 4 quick tools. And Andrew, you can put the strategy chart in the chat now. The identity caucuses. This is something that works really, really well. It creates a great opportunity for people to go off into their groups. You are, and some people have an issue. They're like, oh, well, why would you separate people? So you have white people who get to go off and have conversations about white racism, what it looks like, about their privilege, and they get to do it behind closed doors without people of color. This doesn't happen often. Usually, historically, what has happened, white people talk about racism, you know, when Black people or people of color. So it's a very strong tool to have these identity caucuses. We have in Seattle, for instance, with the city of Seattle, we had our people of color, and then you had the white people, and they came up with Whites Against Racism. And what happened, they had the opportunity to really come up with strategies on how they were going to disrupt racism in the institution and in the community. And again, because they are our allies, and they're over there and they're educating themselves, they're talking and learning, the people of color, we eventually having our same conversations, where it's very important for people of color to have opportunity to talk about what internalized racism looks like, colorism, all these different issues, these tools that usually come into play that keep us from moving forward. But we need to have the opportunity to have those conversations in private without white people. We need to be able to really deal with our own stuff. But then when you bring the groups together, so we ask the people, the Whites Against Racism, who are our allies, how will you support this effort? How will you support the work? And one of the things that we did, we challenged them, because at the time, this was in 1997, I think, when we were having trouble with the school boards. Of course, they continue to have issues, but you have people of color who are always going before the school board, talking about the different issues. We challenged the white people to come up to organize 100 white people to go to the school board meeting and disrupt the meeting and talk about racism. And they did that. The caucuses allowed us to really get clear on what our roles are as allies, and to get to that place where there was, when we came together, we didn't have to talk, you didn't have to deal with the guilt and some of the other things that sometimes happen when people aren't clear. And then we were able to put challenges before our white allies, things again where they agreed to take a risk. And it happened often. We're doing that right now at the city of Alexandria. But we just had our meeting on Thursday, the joint meeting, and it's a new group. So some of the white folks in the group, they are a little apprehensive, so they're learning. They're not quite ready to take on a challenge, but we basically, the ask is, you know, how do we support this? And that's what we've asked of them. And so they have to think about that. Because again, it shouldn't be those that are marginalized that are always taking the risk. And so the identity caucuses are very, very helpful and are being used around the country.
Samantha Morris at Valentine says, we have this group in my service. It's called White Folk Working to End Racism. And Vivian says, working on our own stuff is a good idea. Policing our neighborhoods, restorative justice practice. And Renee loves going in and teaching racism by disrupting a school board meeting. And I think Andrew shared the tool, the chart, the anti-racist strategy chart. And I mean,
right.
I think it's a great tool we have in my service with Food Corps, and it's great, the planning as well as the authenticity. They're able to discuss individual discomfort even within families.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful. So it's something that I encourage organizations, you know, when you start doing the work, having the training, to come up with the identity caucuses. And one of the things that we have to do is, you know, in leadership, we have to make sure we're not asking people to attend those meetings during their lunchtime. It needs to be part of the workday. This is a sanctioned people of color group where people have, you know, we create opportunity to make sure that everyone that they're able to participate. The groups are, they aren't mandatory, but they're available. And so over time, what you see, people begin to join in and come up with some really, really great strategies. So that's one. Another tool, of course, is the equity, the anti-racism. It's an equity audit or an anti-racism audit. And we actually are going to have a webinar next week and look at a number of audits. There's a couple of audits, but it's an excellent tool to really dig in deep and begin to look at your organization, at their policies, and some of the different practices. There are, of course, we all know in organizations, there's the written rules and the unwritten rules. There's this whole idea around culture. And so equity audits allow us to really dig in and look at what's happening within the organization. And so we'll spend time. And these tools, they go hand in hand with the strategy. Can I open this? Anyway, let me just talk about the ally mapping. So the ally mapping, it was introduced really when we're looking at community organizing, identifying organizations and members in the community that are allies. And so you do like just a bubble, you pick out all the people, your champions, identify the organizations. But what I have found over the years, it's also very good to do ally mapping within institutions, within your own organization, especially as you make the commitment to become an anti-racist organization. And so, again, it's important. So if you are on a committee and there are things that need to be addressed, looking around the room and looking at that table, identifying who your allies are, developing those relationships. And it's not only important to know who they are, but understand where they are on that spectrum. Because again, if it's somebody who's neutral, then what happens? You have the opportunity, because that's a fence sitter, you have the opportunity to educate and cultivate that relationship and work really, really hard to get them to become an active ally. So when you're doing the ally mapping, not only naming the folks, naming where they sit in the organization, but also where they are in that spectrum. They're passive. If they're opposition, if they're opposition, then sometimes we know just to leave them alone. Okay, we have 2 minutes. The last one is, oh yeah, that is a good book. Oh, so there's my contact, and I'll have new contact information next week. But I do want us to open up quickly. Andrew, can you put the strategy
chart?
Sure, I can screen share that.
Okay. Whoever put the Angela's conversation up there about the curb cut, thank you. It's a video worth watching.
The curb, I found those links about the curb effect.
Yeah, it's really good. So looking at the anti-racist, the strategy chart, one of the things that, again, it's thinking about being an ally and then thinking about being this work, it's really, really important to do goal setting, to really think about what it is that you want to accomplish. So putting those goals out there, thinking about the organizational considerations. What are some of the things that might keep us from moving forward? Very, very important. The constituents, so again, so we use this with community organizing. You can change that language. But then they're allies, and then the obstacles and the resources. It is really good to be intentional and strategic in doing this work. And so I hope that this was helpful as we think about allies, and I look forward to having the opportunity to work with you guys next week.
Thank you so much, Carol. It was fabulous, and a lot to think about, and I really appreciate all the tools, because I think a lot of this just is talking, and then if there is strategy that we can implement at every level. So come back tomorrow. We're on Friday, so Monday, Yoli Maya is going to be here. Grief as a superpower. And on Tuesday, Robin's going to be doing vicarious trauma, vicarious resilience. On Wednesday, Alexandra and I are going to hold space for conversation on survivor's guilt and thriving during the pandemic. And then Ebony Torres will be here on Thursday for prevention of cancer and chronic conditions during challenging times. And Carol will be back next Friday to help us with the dive deep into the equity audit. So thank you so much. What would you like to amplify as a result of this webinar? Put some hashtag amplifies in there. And yesterday, there was a tool used to create a word cloud on instantaneously. So we might be like adding that to the amplify awareness, amplify love, amplify allyship. Look, this is Andrew and his wife, Michelle. Aren't those masks so cute on? And they're comfortable and they're beautiful and they express your values. Available on the SF website.
She's a nurse in ICU and she really loves the Amplify mask.
Nice.
Andrew.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay, guys, have a great weekend. See you next week.
Okay, take care. And anybody who wants to do a webinar, contact me. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.